we finally go onto the emerald tablet, it was about time. But, as I mentioned at the beginning, I insisted on doing this initial part. You might find it a bit lengthy, but I made sure to bring you the sources. They are very important, so that we do not work with something dubious. That might seem like fantasy to us, so that we feel we are working with sensible things that have a foundation. Now, when we delve into the interpretation of this, I also need to explain a few things to you. First of all, these are teachings that interpreting them in a lucid and complete way, if that is even possible, is not for someone of my stature. Helena Blavatsky used to say that every symbolic structure is a house with 7 doors. You could approach this with a cosmogonic key, a geometric key, or whatever it may be. I will take a small key, which is what I can handle. At least to glimpse something, which is the psychological key and within what I understand. No one serious that I have known throughout my life would take a document of this magnitude and say, I am going to exhaust its meaning. That would not be a normal human being. Either it is someone who does not really know what they're talking about, or it is a being that should not be here. In other words, it is not very accessible to us. To fully clarify for us if that is even possible. Because I believe there are certain keys in myths that are individual. Because it opens up for me. Maybe it will never open for you. There are certain elements that are indeed generic to the entire human psyche. So, here we are, fairly grounded. We will work with an interpretation based on various traditions and, of course, some interpretative elements crafted by myself. But always with humility and sensibility, knowing that we are sketching out some elements. So that you have an idea that this is not as crazy as it seems. Well, let's get started, shall we? The first sentence of the Emerald Tablet says the following: It is truth, without lion, right, and very truthful. That is it. It announces what will come in this way. He states the same thing 4 times. It is true, without falsehood. Certain and most true. Notice that this whole reiteration is as if he wanted to affirm, to swear an oath to what he is saying. I once gave a lecture, which you can find on YouTube, about the golden verses of Pythagoras, where Pythagoras says something similar. There, in his. In the 47th verse, after giving a bunch of life guidelines, he says the following: I swear by that which was transmitted to our souls the sacred quaternary. Whether figures like Hermes Trismegistus, whatever name he might have had, or figures like Pythagoras, whoever he might have been, they do not swear things in vain. If they are of such greatness, with such a breadth of vision, to the point of marking thousands of years of history. Because there are 2 millennia there, at least for each one. These are beings who, when they give their word to something, there is more than just a mere guess involved. There is a matter of honor there. For them, perjury was one of the worst things that could exist. Today, among us, an oath means very little. Due to the level of disrespect we have for ourselves, we do not know ourselves and, consequently, we do not respect ourselves. Therefore, committing perjury is not a big deal. But we are talking about Hermes Trismegistus and Pythagoras. To support something in this way is to swear an oath to it. To swear an oath for an Egyptian sage, or for a Pythagorean sage, for Pythagoras himself, was not just anything. So, from that, you can see that they are presenting something that, for them, is a vision, something imbued with a very deep certainty. In other words, that is the gist of it. We already have a welcome mat that says, enter with respect. It is not just anything that comes next. Then he goes on to say the following, as he explains, what is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below. To accomplish the miracles of one unique thing. In other words, the first part is very familiar to those who know the KYBALION, the principle of correspondence. What is above is what is below. What is below is above. In other words, the world is a microcosm, as Plato said, reflecting the macrocosm. In the Hebrew tradition, we have the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, which is the name of God, and vertically, it represents the human body, head, torso, and limbs. We have the Bible saying that God made man in his image and likeness. Always the same reference, that it is not identical, but similar, the micro with the macro. In other words, whoever deeply understands man understands the structure of the universe very closely. Man, know yourself, and you will know the universe and the gods. It is the maxim of the Temple of Delphi. And he adds something that is original and different for us. What is below is like what is above, and what is above is like what is below. To perform the miracles of one unique thing, what is this unique thing? As we journey through this story, we will see that there is a unique thing that operates its experience within this manifested world. Within that stage of time, which is created in the Egyptian imagery, that stage that opens between Shu and Tefnut. In other words, in that space, time is drawn on the stage of manifestation. There is a being crossing the stage of manifestation, a unique thing, and this unique thing, for these traditions in general, represents consciousness. The universe manifested itself, according to some of these traditions, to generate consciousness, because consciousness is born from contrast. In the contrast between two colors, I perceive both. In the contrast between silence and sound, I perceive both. In the contrast between what I have and what I lost, I perceive the value of what I lost. In other words, contrast generates the spark of consciousness. And the stage of manifestation would be nothing more than a platform for consciousness to tread its path. In other words, this relationship between heaven and earth, between above and below, allows consciousness to see in the concrete world and glimpse into the spiritual world and verify in the spiritual plane. In other words, this symbolic relationship between the physical world and the metaphysical world are clues for consciousness to master both worlds. The unique thing that evolves is consciousness. Not just human consciousness, but consciousness in general. We will see that for ancient civilizations, consciousness is present from the very first moment of the universe in the most fundamental beings and will be present until the last. The history of evolution is the history of consciousness. In the third sentence, he will say, just as all things were and proceed from the one, by the mediation of the one, so all things were born from this unique thing by adaptation. Pay close attention. Just as all things were and proceed from the one through the mediation of the one. In other words, the entire universe comes from unity and will return to it. The very name universe, versus uno, the surroundings of the one. According to Pythagoras, everything comes from unity and reaches the decade. 1 plus 0 is 1 again. These things come and return to unity. Unity is the only reality behind the multiplicity, which is illusory. This is the foundation, as you will see, of various civilizations throughout history. The fact that we are separated is an illusion. And this illusion, when we believe in it too much, makes us violent, envious, competitive, and we start to destroy others who are a part of ourselves. And from there, all the evils of the world are born. This is recurrent in various traditions, from the West and the East. So, behind the apparent multiplicity, we come from the one, we will return to the one, and deep down, we are one. Now, he says that just as things come and return to the one, he presents this as an example, as if it were something accepted and understood by everyone. Building on this, he will draw a parallel. In the same way, all things were born from this unique thing, which would be consciousness, through adaptation. In other words, consciousness as a spark which allows us to perceive and understand things around, of which casts light on things, would be present even in the most primitive being. It is common, we will see this. Helena Blavatsky talks a lot about this in her work, which compiles various civilizations, showing that for many cultures, even a stone would have some type of sensitivity of consciousness. Even in the movement of expansion and contraction, according to the ambient temperature, there would already be some type of perception and consciousness being assimilated there. And evolution is nothing more than the evolution of consciousness. In other words, consciousness adapts. It goes on. Nature constantly offers it new shells. And it starts entering there. And from there, observing the world around it, gathering information and moving on, waiting for the most adapted shell. It adapts to different forms that nature keeps offering to it. When consciousness acquires all the possible experience within a form, it moves on to another. And the tendency is for it to extinguish. Let it be left behind. Understand, folks, let's bring this into our lives. When you live an experience deeply, I do not know, I like to go to certain places to have fun. If you live that deeply, learn everything that environment has to offer you and move beyond it. There comes a certain moment in maturity. If someone invites you to go back to those dances from your teenage years, there's something in you that can't stand it. It is surpassed. It died. It was left behind. Consciousness refuses to go back to what it has already overcome. So, in everything in our lives, there are certain moments when we should let forms die that are no longer suitable for the journey of our consciousness. What happens within us on a micro level also happens on a macro level in nature. So, nature would offer forms and consciousness would move through them. To gather information, to enrich oneself, to expand. And consciousness is the eternal pilgrim, journeying and crossing the stage of life from the one to the one again. And it will return to the Father's house with arms full of fruits, which is all this perception it gathered throughout all the forms that life offered it, that nature offered it. It seems enigmatic, but everything here will revolve around this idea. Therefore, at least as a work of imagination, try to understand this. And we will see that it's interesting when he talks about consciousness adapting to different forms. Because if you refer back to the KYBALION, there is a principle, which is the principle of vibration. It says that the identity of each form is exactly the level of vibration that its consciousness holds within. I want to know who you are. You need to know where your consciousness vibrates, which level. You resonate with acts of honor. Do you resonate with justice, with kindness? Or do you only resonate with coarse, vulgar, violent appeals? So, the inner name, the tradition of the inner name, speaks precisely to the identification of your consciousness, what it resonates with. In other words, another point of communication with the KYBALION. So, this idea is that consciousness temporarily adapts and identifies with forms. Then it continues climbing its ladder. The sun is its father, the moon is its mother, the wind brought it in its womb, the earth feeds it. Here, there are versions that say the earth is nutritious, the earth is Aya. The father of everything, the telesma of everyone is here. What is this? I repeat, the sun is your father, the moon is your mother. The wind carried you in its womb, the earth nourishes you. The father of all, the telesma of the whole world is here. This is not a simple matter. We are facing the emerald tablet. You will notice that we will have to resort to various symbolisms, including the Egyptian ones, to better understand this. So, it is evident that within a symbolic tradition, like Egypt, the sun is connected. Aman, Ra, the sun is connected with the spiritual father. The spiritual father. And the moon as the mother. Why the moon? The moon, as the primordial substance, along with the primordial spirit, come together to create a child. That will have traits of the father, spirit, and traits of the mother, substance, matter. You might ask me, why the mother is not the earth? Because it is not from her that we derive our substance, our matter. You will have to use a bit of imagination, because this is not simple. Helena Blavatsky talks a lot about this. More or less, that is the idea, not just here for Egypt. We see a lot of this there, towards the east as well. If you take, for example, a plant, it would be a child of the sun and the earth. An animal would be a child of the sun and the earth. But it turns out that when you create a human being, the substance needed to create a human being, not all of it the earth has. Because there's a substance that distinguishes the human being, which is the mind. Mind for Egyptians and for various other traditions. It is much more than the physical brain. It is a plane. It is a mental substance. This mental substance the earth would not have. Something broader would have to come from another place to compose this being. Man would be a child of the sun and the moon, and the earth would be like the Aya, the nutritious, providing him with its nourishment. But it would not have all the necessary components to form a human being. Can you understand this? In other words, if you take, for example, a fairy tale, that is why I like them so much. There is much more than you might imagine there. When we talk about the birth of Sleeping Beauty, where the fairies go and give gifts to the princess, it is as if, in a certain way, these traditions are saying that to create a human being, you need some energy from outside the earth. To be able to provide some elements, because the human being is a complex being, he could not just be a child of the earth's substances. So, it seems that the moon contributes in some way to complete this being. In other words, it is a symbolism. I am just sharing with you some ideas from these traditions. I will not go into details because I do not even know the details myself. But it would be more or less this idea, which is very well expressed in Egyptian theology. You will see that you have the Great Mother, Isis, a great earthly mother, but you have Hathor, who is the great lady of life, who has exactly horns or a crescent moon on her head. In other words, it would be a primordial substance, broader than just the earth. And this Hathor, who is the house of Horus, her name means that. She is the one responsible for the generation, along with the sun, of the human being. And the earth provides him with its nourishment. And then comes a wind. What wind is this? The wind carried him in its womb. In other words, the idea of the womb is the idea of life. The wind represents the air. The pneuma, that is, the breath of life. This pneuma, this air, this breath, represents the life that was given. So, there is a seed of the substance, a seed of the spirit, that come together. The breath of life comes through and gives him existence, and then the earth nourishes him. Is its Aya, it is its nurturer. And in this process, which he will say at the end, is a very complete process of creation. In other words, if we understood this, then we would understand everything that the sun creates within its system. It would require the participation of all these elements. In this process, these would be the necessary components for the creation of man. On the earth, this man, who has reached a level of consciousness high enough to want to understand his origins, complicated, isn't it? But we are working with Egypt. We are working with more than that. We will see that India, Tibet have quite similar things. The idea of all these elements that we today take only at face value. The sun is shining up there, and we do not often consider it. The sun as an example of a giver of life, a giver of light. This example of the Father, which is often associated with the Spirit. We don't often consider the earth or the moon as examples of substance, of matter. We are not accustomed to symbolic thinking. We are in a civilization where everything is very shallow. Everything is very much on the surface. So, symbolism for us is something that gives us a headache. But if you want to delve into not just the knowledge of Egypt, all right, let us leave Egypt aside. Pretend that all of this is a legend. But if you want to delve into the knowledge of your own life, it is about developing a bit of a symbolic mindset. Because the life of the Egyptians and ours share the same component. It is all symbolic. That is why we have such difficulty understanding them. We no longer work with symbols. We take everything literally, and then every difficulty, instead of learning from it, we feel hurt, and we simply shut ourselves off. So, realize that it is not by chance. That everything symbolic is so impenetrable to us, is so complicated, so hermetically sealed. So, what about the telesma? Telesma is a word related to ritual, to sacralization, the sacred rite. So, we see that there is the telesma, the rite that governs the process of life in our world and in our system. Everything that is a child of the sun follows this telesma, this sacred rite, which, by the way, is the same origin as the word talisman. This sacred rite that brings beings to life. Particularly in the case of human beings who need fairies, external elements, to complete this work. The whole system cooperating. The whole system donating elements so that everything can exist. This reminds me of something that many people are studying in forests today, showing that in the roots there is an exchange of energy among the trees. And you see a tree on the surface. You cannot imagine how many others contribute to the existence of that tree. We see the surface of life. Perhaps we do not realize that beneath the earth, beneath appearances, there is much exchanging, an intelligent process within the system where everything contributes to everything. Who knows? At least consider it as a possibility. I think it is good to listen. Continuing. In the sixth phrase, it will say the following: its strength remains intact when it is covered into earth. It's of what? We are talking about the pilgrim, about consciousness. You take consciousness, wrap it up with a bunch of organic matter, a body. It does not become blind because it is wrapped in matter. It continues to have what? The same strength, the same vision, the same discernment. In other words, when consciousness is wrapped in a body, it takes this body as material to reflect upon and work with. In fact, it seems that consciousness came into the world precisely to be able to know all the possibilities of the world. You place it inside a body, and it remains active, with the ability to see from it and through it. It takes the potentialities that this body has of sense, of vision, to see an aspect of the universe that it hadn't seen until then. And it continues its journey with the baggage that this body has given it. This body has ways of learning a lot of information from its surroundings. It takes this baggage, it sees the body and sees through it. And it continues its journey with this baggage that this body has provided. Of course, we are indeed talking about what you are thinking. We are talking about a tradition that is reincarnationist. I am not presenting this as the truth, not at all. I am simply showing it to you. That was how they thought. Everyone has the right to analyze reality through all possibilities. Here's the Egyptian. It is worth getting to know her. It is no wonder that these people went down in history as so enigmatic and profound. There must be something for us to learn. The seventh phrase goes as follows: you will separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the dense, gently and with great skill. Exactly the consciousness that is capable of this. It has discernment, separating the core of things. Distinguish what each one is. And it distinguishes in a very peculiar way when consciousness is already at a certain point of development. That it sees what things are and not their reflection on things, which is typical of ignorance. Remember that phrase from the Brazilian singer Caetano Veloso? Narcissus finds ugly what is not a mirror. We look at things. If they please me, they are good. If they do not please me, they are evil. And what are they in themselves? I do not know, I do not want to know, and I resent those who do. You have no awareness of this object. He passed by you, and you did not see him. This is a utilitarian view. Man considers himself too important, believes that everything exists to serve him, and only sees things when they can bring him some benefit. The old phrase by Tolstoy that I use so often: there are those who walk through a forest and only see firewood for their campfire. That is, consciousness, when it is mature enough not to project a bunch of desires and interests onto things, but to see things as they truly are. She is capable of distinguishing the core of things, what they are, both together and apart. What is the nature of things? And this also relates to the attribute of intelligence, intelligere, to choose among. It is capable of seeing itself, the body where it resides. It sees itself as a phenomenon, aware and understanding the things around her. This is the first element. So, she has discernment, which is precisely the ability to separate, to choose the good grain, to distinguish the subtle from the concrete, what belongs to the heavens, what belongs to the earth, the role, the deeper identity of each thing, in the heavens and on the earth. And in sentence 8, he will say, it will rise from the earth to the sky, and again descend to the earth. In this way, it receives the string of the higher and lower things. Look, this is exactly what we've talked about so many times. is that the human being has a level of consciousness which, when matured, allows them to do this. Their head is in the heavens and their feet on the earth. This is a pontifex, the one who builds the bridge. In other words, they live in both worlds, understands and accepts the laws of both worlds, but is capable of connecting them, of bringing what is from the heavens, to illuminate the experiences of the earth, and vice versa, to take your earthly experiences to be enlightened by the laws of the spiritual, by the laws of the realm of ideas, as Plato would say, or however you wish to call it. As I mentioned to you just a little while ago, this is found in the Kali Kapurana, in the Indian scripture, in general. This is found in basically all traditions. The man who has stature has enough presence for this. It is not physical stature, it is the stature of consciousness. To touch the earth with your feet and the sky with your head. So, he ascends from the earth to the heavens and then descends again to the earth, receiving the strength of both superior and inferior things. And it unites the two. There you have the six-pointed star. It unites the forces of the upper triangle with the lower triangle. They intertwine. Phrase number 9. By this means you will obtain the glory of the world, and all darkness will depart from you. When you manage to build this bridge, without denying either of the two worlds, notice that we have cycles and cycles throughout history. For example, in the Middle Ages, where we denied everything that is material, everything material was considered sinful. It is like you have the front of a temple where a column has been removed. Of course, that's going to collapse. Then you move to a very materialistic era, where you deny everything that is metaphysical, everything that is spiritual, and that's also an unbalanced front. What he says here is, have the pillar of spirit and the pillar of matter, respect each of them and harmonize, consciousness harmonizes over both. Understand the two worlds and harmonize exactly the two intertwined triangles in the six-pointed star. So, he says that through this means, we obtain the glory of the world. What is the glory of the world? If we are precisely seeking to understand the unity, which is the reality behind all these appearances, what glory would there be if I understand, for example, that my body is a unity, for my hand to have more prestige than my foot? There is no logic. All is part of a single body. If I know that you and I are a single body, what glory would there be in you having more prestige than me? Or vice versa. The glory of the world is wisdom. Walking this path, you reach wisdom, which is the only true glory one can attain in the world. And all darkness will move away from you. Darkness is truly ignorance. In other words, you will obtain glory and wisdom, and all ignorance will move away from you. This is the journey of victorious human consciousness. Achieve this result. 10th. It is the strong force of all force, for it will overcome all subtle things and penetrate all solid things. This is how the world was created. The world was created so that this strong force, which is consciousness, can penetrate all substances. There is nothing that is impermeable. It penetrates from the densest matter to the most subtle planes, on its journey back home. And from everything, it will draw its experience. It will overcome every subtle thing and penetrate every solid thing. Thus, the world was created. The world was created full of dualities, so that consciousness can dive into all of them and assimilate every possible aspect that can be absorbed within the manifestation. Consciousness traverses all possibilities, gathering every perspective of the manifested universe. To compose with this, a wisdom of all the lights of a prism, of all the faces, and bring them together. All of this once again into unity. Bring more and more consciousness to the plane of unity, until, once again, it gathers and expands in another moment. Progressive process of consciousness, thus the world was created. Without absolute truths. This is a tradition, as I was saying from the beginning, something just to ponder. A reflection on ancient traditions. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe they are not so primitive after all. Technology is a very good thing when we have technology about external things and about internal things. Why don't we unite the two? They did not have much technology regarding external things. All right, but when it comes to internal things, it seems they had more than we do. And if we had both angles, both visions, how could this contribute to our lives? Stop and think about that. There is a phrase by Professor George Angel Livroga, who is the founder of New Acropolis, that says, "A man who rode a chariot in Rome, a man who flies today in a jet. The vehicle really advanced. Has humanity progressed as well? Can we say that he has progressed in honor, in principles, in scruples, in loyalty, in justice? Well, that is quite doubtful. And what if both the machine and the driver of the machine progressed at the same time?" So, the Egyptians are engaging in a deep reflection on consciousness, which is what makes all beings evolve, which sheds light on all beings. In other words, the progress of the driver, and not just the machine. Phrase 11. From this, admirable adaptations will come from this. Whose means are here? From that remarkable adaptations will be made. Whose means are here? That is, forms and more forms. Nature will create. By the law of necessity, so that consciousness inhabits all these forms, and learn from all of them as if they were subjects in a course. Consciousness needs to learn about such an aspect, nature. It is tasked with generating a form through which consciousness can have contact with this element, which is necessary to know, guided by the law of necessity. In other words, remarkable adaptations will be made. Remarkable constructions will arise so that consciousness can pass through all the points it needs to reach a good outcome. Of course, we can apply the principle of correspondence and incorporate it into our lives. We, each of us, must reach a certain level of self-knowledge and mastery over circumstances. A certain level of wisdom. It is inherent in our lives to move from ignorance to wisdom, at least to some degree, 1 step, 2 steps, however many are possible. And of course, life will take us to those points we need to pass through to learn. Of course, sometimes you are caught off guard by a sudden change in life, taking you to a place you didn't expect to go. Who knows? Maybe it is life offering you a new form, because you have some knowledge, some wisdom that you needed to grasp there so that your consciousness could continue its journey. Notice, all of this can be reflected within the psychological field, helping us to understand our own lives a little better. The Roman Stoics spoke of this. Nothing happens to a person that is not meant for them. In other words, life leads us to the forms and circumstances necessary for growth. 12th. Therefore I am called Hermes Trismegistus, because I possess the 3 parts of the wisdom of the entire world. He says, that is why I am the one who is called Trismegistus or Trismegistus, which is also used, because I know the 3 parts. Now, these 3 parts, what exactly is he talking about? He might be talking about the 3 stages of the universe, which in India is called the Trimurti. The construction, which is with Brahma. The preservation, which is with Vishnu, and the renewal, the destruction, which is with Shiva. He might be talking about these 3 parts. He might be talking about the 3 natures of beings, which are the physical body, the psychic body, and the noetic or spiritual body. In some way, he compartmentalized the stages of evolution in the manifested universe and said, I know the 3. It could be in time, it could be in space, I do not know. But the fact is, he claims to know these possibilities within the utmost that a human being can know. That is what is expected of a wise person, to know as much as possible about human nature and its highest possibilities. So he says, that is why I am called Trismegistus, because I possess the 3 parts of all the wisdom in the world. And finally, what I said about the operation of the sun is complete. In other words, he is referring back to that moment of the sun, the moon, the earth, the wind, the telesima. In other words, I gave the recipe for the cake to create within this world, this operation of the sun within its limit, which would be not so much. The world would be more like the solar system to create within it the recipe for this. The operation is this, and what I said is complete. For those who understand well, everything has been said. Notice that, no matter how much we walk, we may never be a complete understander. But even a dose of this understanding can already have a great utility in our lives. That old story I always tell you. If I do not like the sun, I close the doors and windows of my house because I do not like it. I am at a distance X from the sun. If I decide to make peace with the sun and open doors and windows, my distance from it remains the same, X. But just by being willing to make contact with it, it illuminates me where I am. If you walk towards it, this light will become increasingly intense. But just the willingness to put myself in contact with the sun, it illuminates me where I am. In other words, knowledge like this is very distant. But just the willingness to work with the premises of this knowledge, that is, to seek unity, to perfect human consciousness, to understand the manifested world as symbolic of something beyond, and to build a bridge between these two worlds. The understanding of these premises and their application in our lives already gives us a very different predisposition. We already have the sun inside our house, considering that at any point along the path, if we believe in these traditions, we have an almost infinite line. From unity to unity, at any point along the path, we will always be learners. And what we learn at this moment corresponds to the need we have at this moment. It is just right. What we cannot allow ourselves is to go through things with our eyes closed. So, this is the little I can offer you about the Emerald Tablet. I think this little bit can certainly, on some level, illuminate some possibility in your life. I believe in that. There were men of all sizes in Egypt, and for all of them, this had some usefulness. If we abolish prejudice without madness, with good sense, and are willing to look at it with the spirit of learners, certainly there is something there that can be quite useful to us. And finally, to conclude, only knowledge that makes us better is useful. In other words, let all of this not be mere speculation. Although I have sought the fundamentals in the best way I could to have a certain wisdom in our journey, because an exaggeration in one direction is equivalent to an exaggeration in the other. In other words, nothing is true or everything is extraordinarily true. Our excesses. Here, we see what we can verify from these documents. From all these traditions, see what we can understand without too much fantasy. Not considering ourselves as owners of the truth, but rather believing that the little we extract from it can be useful for our lives. And then, yes, it transforms into true knowledge. We do not live from what we eat, we live from what we assimilate. It is another phrase from Professor George Angel Livraga, the philosopher who founded New Acropolis, which I find tremendously useful. We do not live from everything we ingest, but only from what we assimilate. A large part simply passes through us and is discarded. It will blend with other beings of nature, but not within us. Well, these are some reflections that I would like you to, slowly and carefully, think about a little. Even in the darkest emerald tablet, there may be some teaching that is useful to us. Who knows, in the future, some might find some usefulness in our lives. And we'll learn something. I think this is a rather fair and even noble aspiration. That is all then. A hug to each of you.